Thank you very much, Kachichu. Ms. Aziza Sato and other representatives of Asian Development Bank and our audience. Over the next 10 minutes or so, I'm going to, as a part of the policy paper development team, I'm going to briefly present a summary of our policy paper on social protection for people with disabilities, overcoming inequality to create independent living. This policy paper, as mentioned earlier, was co-developed and co-written by 40 disabled people's organizations across Indonesia. So the formulation processes involve like 120 people with disability, representing all types of disabilities from all parts of Indonesia in a series of activities such as webinars, focus group discussions, as well as having consultation with relevant experts and prominent disability activists. Probably you can go to slide 3 right away. Slide 3, yeah, thank you. People with disability in Indonesia, as we know it, are one of those frequently left behind in development. So data from Indonesian Central Bureau of Statistics indicate that the number of people with disability who can access various basic services is much lower than those without disability. The case is even worse for people with severe or multiple disabilities. For example, the inequality is seen in people with disabilities access to the 9-year compulsory education, which is 8.5 times lower, and the employment rate, which is 5.4 times lower. The picture also looks grimmer for people with disability during the COVID-19 pandemic. They are the most vulnerable affected group. The findings of a study conducted by Indonesian DPO Network for Inclusive COVID-19 Response demonstrate that 86% of working people with disability experience a decrease in income. About 45% of the respondents claim that they lost 50 to 80% of their income. So consequently, they were faced with a greater difficulty in making ends meet and paying the bills. Next slide. The existing social programs offered by the government are less accessible for people with disability. The findings from the focus group discussions that we organized with 40 disabled people's organizations throughout Indonesia reveal 7 barriers faced by people with disability in accessing the existing social protection programs. They are population administration and data registration issues, limited access to program information and program membership, prevailing stigma, indications of misuse of corruption by implementing agents in the field, and a mismatch of assistance and real needs. Furthermore, most of the existing social programs only target poor households in which the received benefits are minimal. So the benefits are given only to persons with disability registered as a family member, and the number of recipients is limited to 1 person for each household. So these existing programs are poverty threshold based, in which the targeted households are those belonging to 40% of households with the lowest welfare level. Next slide. Now, if we look at to what extent people with disability in Indonesia have been covered by the existing social protection programs, a study by Bappenas, or the Indonesian Ministry of National Development Planning, disclosed that only 5%, or about 1.7 million people with disability, are registered in the integrated social welfare data administered by Indonesian Ministry of Social Affairs. In addition to very limited coverage, the existing social protection programs do not consider extra cost of living with disability. A research by Prospera, this demonstrates that a household with a disabled family member has to incur over 19% extra cost. And this is even above the rate of the national minimum wage. The extra costs include, among other things, purchase of assistive devices, fees for personal assistance or attendant care, particularly for those with high support needs, and then transportation-related costs such as vehicle modification, use of spatial transport, and travel companion, fees for therapies as well as medical and non-medical consultations, fees for sign language interpreter, residential or house modification, assistive software related costs, and many others. And all those extra costs will inevitably increase the living costs of households with disabled family members. Next slide, please. All right, and our policy paper recommends that the Indonesian government design a comprehensive social protection program for people with disability consisting of concessions, cash transfers, and direct services. I think the earlier video has also shown this. Next slide. All right. Concession is intended to help with the extra cost of living with disability by reduction or exemption of costs for people with disability. So the concessions may include various public services and life necessities such as transportation, utilities like electricity and water, house rent, telephone and internet bills, or tickets to recreational sites, food and entertainment, and many others. Tax reduction for motor vehicles, properties, and imported assistive devices and medicines should count as important concession as well. Next slide. Cash transfer programs relate to direct benefits to persons with disability and incentives for caregivers or personal assistance subsidies. So it is like a lifetime disability direct allowance. All people with disability are entitled to direct benefit in the form of cash allowance. However, the amount received by people with severe disability or those with high and complex support needs should be greater than that of people with less severe impairments to meet their higher extra costs. And for those with more profound disability and are unable to work, the amount received should not only help with the extra costs, but also their daily living needs. And the caregiver allowance is intended to recompense the caregivers' loss of opportunity to engage in productive activities due to providing 24-hour care for their disabled family members. Next slide. Direct services are those provided by relevant ministries in the form of affirmation programs and policies. For example, Ministry of Health can ensure provision of high quality assistive devices that meet the real needs of people with disability. And this kind of affirmation programs can be funded through a sort of synergy among stakeholders, including local governments, healthcare, and social security agencies or BPJS, private sector, and others. Ministry of Social Affairs can as well provide services of personal assistant, attendant care, respite care, or other similar care services. And an example of affirmation program by the Ministry of Public Works and Ministry of Finance can be in the form of subsidized public housing loans for people with disability, provision of community-based housing with state-paid services and assistance from social workers, and incentives for house modification for families with disabled members. Next slide. Last but not least, ensuring a comprehensive social protection program for people with disability will also require implementation of strategic related policies. So, for example, realization of disability cards issuance across the country that will entitle the card holders their right to access social protection programs to be the priority policy. And it is also important to build a kind of integrated service center for persons with disability in each district or city. So this organization will serve as a center for services and coordination related to the handling of disability issues. Next slide. Well, yeah, I think that concludes my presentation. Thank you very much. Over to Chichu.